If it weren't for the $3.5 million my mother left me, my family would probably still be at peace. But because of it, I finally saw the true nature of certain people. And today, I want to tell you my story from beginning to end so that anyone who believes family will always put love first might think twice. My name is Sarah Collins. I'm 35 years old and live in the suburbs of Seattle, Washington. Before all of this happened, my life was simple. I stayed home to raise our 2 kids, Emma and Lucas. My husband, David, 37, worked as a software engineer. His income was enough to give us a comfortable life. Not wealthy, but we never had to worry about paying the bills. I grew up in Spokane, in a working-class family. My father passed away when I was just 14. My mother worked 2 jobs, mornings at a grocery store, evenings as a cashier at a movie theater just to keep us afloat. She was the strongest woman I've ever known, and she always told me, money is important, but character is what keeps relationships alive. Because of her, I grew up believing kindness is never wasted. I'm not the kind of person who turns away when someone needs help. If a neighbor needed someone to watch their child, I'd do it. If there was a fundraiser for the local hospital, I'd contribute what I could. And I've always been the type to put family first. Even my in-laws. When I married David, I truly felt lucky. He was kind, genuine, and most importantly, respectful. My in-laws, well, we weren't especially close. But we kept things polite. David's mother, Margaret, 62, a retired teacher and widow, could be controlling at times, but she adored her grandchildren. His older brother, Robert, 40, had been unemployed for years. He lived with Margaret, along with his wife, Linda, stylish, high maintenance, and prone to overspending. We weren't close friends, but there was no real bad blood either. Our family life revolved around small joys. Dropping the kids off at school, cooking dinner with David, weekend picnics at the park. Sometimes Margaret would visit, bringing a homemade pie and playing with the kids. Sure, she'd occasionally ask when I was going back to work in a way that stung a little, but I told myself she meant well. And then things changed. It was a drizzly afternoon when I got the call from my mother's lawyer. His voice was calm, deliberate. Sarah, I know this is a difficult time, but your mother left her entire estate to you. That includes the sale of her farm, her savings, and some small investments. The total value right now is approximately $3.5 million. I froze in my chair, partly because the grief was still fresh, but also because that number was staggering. For someone like me, someone who had never even imagined holding that kind of wealth, it didn't feel real. Tears rolled down my face, not just from loss, but from gratitude. I knew how hard my mother had worked for every penny. This was her way of protecting me, even when she couldn't be here anymore. In that moment, I made myself a promise. I would not waste this money. I'd put most of it into an education fund for Emma and Lucas, and invest the rest safely for our future. Maybe even donate to the charities my mother cared about. David was the first person I told. He held me tightly, saying my mother must have been so proud of me. His eyes, they were warm, full of nothing but empathy and happiness for me. We spent the whole evening talking about good things. letting Emma go to the private middle school she dreamed of, sending Lucas to a summer science program in California, finally remodeling the kitchen I'd wanted to fix for years. I had no plans to tell my in-laws about the money, not because I didn't trust them, but because I felt this was between David and me. And if they ever needed help, I would be the one to offer. But the next night, while David was on the phone with his mother, I overheard him say, "Oh, Mom, guess what? Sarah just got an inheritance from her mom. Pretty big amount." My heart sank. Not out of fear, not yet, but because I knew money has a way of pulling people in. And sometimes it changes them. David didn't notice my hesitation. He just smiled and squeezed my hand. "She'll be happy to know we've got a bit more financial security. Don't think negatively." "Okay," I nodded, trying to believe he was right. But somewhere deep down, a quiet unease took root. One I had no idea would turn out to be exactly right. If I ended the story here, what would you think? Would you believe a large sum of money only brings good things? Or would you wonder if it can set everything on fire? Stay with me, because in the next part, you'll see how quickly everything started to change. It didn't take long. The very next morning after David's phone call with his mother, there was a knock at our door. When I opened it, Margaret stood there, clutching a Tupperware container of her famous cinnamon rolls, the ones she usually made only at Christmas. "Thought I'd surprise my grandbabies," she said with a smile that somehow felt a little too wide. It wasn't unusual for her to visit, but unannounced visits at 9 a.m. on a weekday, that was new. She came in, kissed Emma and Lucas on the forehead, and then turned to me. "Sarah, honey, how are you holding up after, everything with your mom?" I told her I was managing, still processing, still missing Mom. She patted my hand. "I know, dear. But it's also a blessing, isn't it? Your mother taking care of you like that." Her eyes lingered just a second too long, as if weighing the words she didn't say. That week, she dropped by twice more. Once with banana bread because the kids need a treat, and once with a bag of Emma's favorite craft supplies. I wanted to believe it was all genuine. But each visit somehow circled back to little comments. "Have you thought about putting some of that money into real estate? Property values in Tacoma are climbing. Robert has a friend who's a financial advisor. Very trustworthy. You should meet him." I would smile politely, thank her for the suggestions, and then change the subject. She didn't push. Not yet. Then came Robert and Linda. Robert had barely set foot in our house in the past year. He claimed he was too busy with odd jobs, though everyone knew he'd been out of steady work for years. Linda. Well, Linda had a way of making every conversation about herself. She was the kind of woman who wore designer sunglasses indoors and spoke loudly so everyone knew she was wearing them. Suddenly, they were both in the neighborhood every few days. They'd arrive with small gifts for the kids, a stuffed animal here, a box of Legos there, and for me, exaggerated compliments. "Sarah, you've always been so good with managing money," Linda said one afternoon, leaning against my kitchen counter as though she owned it. Now you can really, I don't know, do something big. Robert nodded. Yeah. In fact, I've been thinking about a project. I'm working on a property flip in Tacoma. It's practically a sure thing. All it needs is some upfront capital. With the right partner, it could double in a year. His project sounded suspiciously similar to the one Margaret had hinted at. I laughed it off. I'm not in a position to invest in anything right now. I've already made plans for the money. Robert's smile tightened. Of course, of course. Just thought I'd throw it out there. Linda gave me a long look, the kind people give when they're not sure if you're naive or just stubborn. Margaret's visits kept coming. She began bringing along articles she'd printed from the internet about how cash just sitting in a bank loses value. One morning, she even arrived with a brochure for a luxury retirement community. I'm not saying you should buy now, she said, tapping the page with a manicured finger. But think of it as a long-term investment. You could even rent it out until you're ready to use it. I smiled, nodded, and changed the subject to Lucas's science project. Part of me felt flattered. It was strange, but for once, I wasn't just a stay-at-home mom in their eyes. They were treating me like someone important, someone whose opinions mattered. But another part of me felt cornered. It was like being in a room where the walls were slowly, imperceptibly moving closer. They weren't asking outright for money, not yet, but every conversation was a careful dance around it. Margaret's concern, Robert's opportunities, Linda's friendly advice. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch with David and said, "Have you noticed how much your family's been around lately?" He chuckled. "Yeah, but maybe they're just happy for us. They know we're in a good spot now. Happy for us," I repeated quietly. The words didn't sit right. It didn't feel like happiness. It felt like positioning. In my heart, I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to believe this was just them being excited for us. For me. But there was a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispering that this was the beginning of something else. Something I wasn't ready to name, but would soon see clearly. If you think this is still harmless, just wait. Because in the next part, they start testing just how much I'm willing to give. After weeks of soft smiles and gentle advice, the tone shifted. No more circling. No more polite detours. They came straight for the money. It started with a celebration dinner. Margaret called on a Thursday afternoon. Her voice was honey sweet. "Why don't you and David join me downtown this weekend? You've had such a hard year, Sarah. Let me treat you both." Treat? The word clung to me like perfume that's just a little too strong. David squeezed my hand. "Let's go. It'll be nice." So we went. White tablecloths, low lamps, a grand piano whispering through the room. Robert and Linda were already there, smiling like they'd been waiting to open a surprise. 2 starters sat half-eaten in the center of the table. Price tags large enough to make me blink. We sat. Menus like leather-bound novels. Numbers that could cover a week of groceries with a single entree. Live a little. Linda laughed, flagging the sommelier. "Get the Cabernet, the top one," Robert added, not looking at me, looking at the list like it was a game. Plates arrived in waves, oysters, steak, something with truffle shavings I could still smell hours later. David chatted about work. Margaret told a story about Emma's school art show and somehow turned it into a monologue about investing in potential. I smiled. I nodded. I counted the ways this night felt choreographed. When dessert glasses were empty, The waiter approached. He didn't ask who would like the check. He didn't place it in the center. He set the leather folder gently in front of me, like a waiter places a ring box before the person who's supposed to say yes. Silence. Robert checked his phone. Linda dabbed her lips. Margaret admired the chandelier. David glanced at me and then away, uncertain. The leather was warm under my palm. I could feel my heart in my fingertips. I paid. I smiled like it meant nothing. But inside, something thin and important tore a little. It wasn't the bill. It was the assumption. The quiet choreography that said, "Of course Sarah will cover it. Of course she will pass the test." 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from an aunt on David's side, someone I'd met twice. "Heard about your blessing, sweetie. Do you think you could help me bridge a medical bill? Just a small amount?" My throat went dry. How did she even know I called Margaret? "Oh, I might have mentioned it to Aunt Carol," she said breezily. "You know how news travels. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." By Friday, I had 6 messages. A family friend who hadn't sent a holiday card in 5 years. Linda's sister, with a temporary emergency. Robert's college buddy, forwarding me a GoFundMe and adding, "Even a little from you would go a long way." I closed my eyes and let the phone rest face down on the table. The silence hummed. My chest felt tight, like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. Then Robert sent the email. Subject line, "Golden opportunity time, sensitive." "Sarah, this is exactly the kind of smart move you should make now. Duplex in Tacoma, undervalued, huge upside. We buy, we fix, we flip. Easy win in 12 months. There were photos of a sad-looking building pretending to be a promise. A spreadsheet with green highlighted cells that added up to magic. And in the middle of the 3rd paragraph, the part he hoped I wouldn't read closely, the tell-all hold title to "Streamline Financing and Keep Tax Complications Off Your Plate." You fund the purchase and rehab. I manage everything. My stomach sank like a stone in cold water. I didn't need to know real estate law to understand this. Ownership is gravity. Money orbits ownership, and he wanted the gravity to be his. I stared at the screen until the words went fuzzy. My hands trembled, not with fear, exactly. With fury, I was trying to hold still. Linda arrived that afternoon to keep me company. She wandered my kitchen like it belonged to her, tracing the marble with her nails. "My car's at the shop," she sighed, not looking at me. "Something with the transmission. It's so silly. Isn't it? Money's just numbers. But if you could spot me for a week, I'll pay you right back, Linda," I said gently. "I'm not lending money right now." Her smile slipped, then snapped back into place like elastic. "Of course. No worries. You're just new to having so much. It takes time to learn how to use it." When the door closed behind her, the house felt 10 degrees colder. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I showed David the email. I told him about the texts, the dinner, the bill, the look on his mother's face when she said nothing to worry about. "Do you see it?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. They aren't asking. They're assuming. They're testing how far they can push. David read the email twice. He exhaled slowly, like he was trying to calm a room. "We'll say no," he said. "That's all." People overstep when they're excited. It doesn't have to be a fight. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to climb into the soft, safe version of our life where no was enough. But my mind wouldn't stop replaying the waiter's hand, placing the bill. The way a hunter sets a trap and then steps back to watch. More little things followed. Margaret called to ask if I could temporarily put the summer family trip deposit on my card just to lock in the rate. Robert texted at 11:47 m. "Insurance is due and my bank messed up the transfer. Could you sell me $800? I'll give it back Friday." Linda sent a link to a private school open house not for Emma or Lucas. For her nephew. He's brilliant. Sarah. Honestly, this is the kind of thing money is for. Each time. I said no. Carefully. Politely. Like stepping around glass. Each time. The silence on the other end stretched a little longer. Inside me, something else was happening. Shame tried to creep in, that ancient conditioning that tells women to smooth every edge, to say yes, to keep the peace, but another voice, older, fiercer, rose up. My mother's voice. "Money is important," she'd said. "But character is what keeps relationships alive. What do you call it when people don't want you, they want what you have? What do you call it when love becomes leverage?" I lay awake that night, listening to David's breathing, the whisper of rain against the window. I counted the asks, the tests, the quiet choreography. This wasn't excitement. This was a campaign, and campaigns don't stop when you're polite. They stop when you draw a line. I wasn't ready to draw it yet, but my hand was inching toward the sand. If the second act began with a smile, the third ended with a mirror, and in it, I finally saw what they saw when they looked at me. Not a daughter-in-law, not a sister, not even a person. A wallet with a heartbeat. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Stay. Because in the next part, they won't just ask. They'll try to make decisions for me, for my children, for our future. And that's when the word no stops being polite and becomes a wall. If, in the beginning, their requests still came with polite smiles, now, it felt like decisions were being made for me and I was just being informed afterwards. I had told myself foolishly that refusing a few times would be enough, but I was wrong. They didn't just want my money, they wanted control. It started on a gray Tuesday morning. The rain tapped lightly against the kitchen window while I stood over the stove, flipping pancakes for Emma and Lucas. The smell of maple syrup was in the air. The kids were giggling over something on the tablet. My phone rang. Margaret. I wiped my hands and picked up. "Sarah," she said. Her voice warm, almost too warm. "I've put down a deposit on a lovely beach house in Ocean Shores, right by the water. The sunsets there are incredible." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "Oh, and don't worry," she added quickly. "It's coming from your inheritance. Of course. It'll be a great investment for the family." My mind went blank. "You already put money down without even asking me." She chuckled softly, as if I was overreacting. "Oh, Sarah, you worry too much. I've invested my whole life. You've never managed this kind of money before. Let me take this off your plate. The casual way she said it, like my say in the matter was optional. I hung up that call with my heart pounding. It wasn't just the deposit, it was the assumption. The quiet message between her words. This money is ours to use. A few days later, David and I were invited to dinner at her house. She said it would be a nice family night. It wasn't. The moment we walked in, I noticed the table not set for dinner, but laid out like a boardroom. Neat stacks of folders, each labeled in bold Robert, property, Linda, business, family reserve. Margaret greeted us with a practiced smile. Sit. I've been working on something exciting. Robert leaned back in his chair, arms folded, grinning like a man who already knew he'd won something. Linda was dressed to perfection, nails glossy, phone face down beside her plate, a sign she wanted me to think she was focused. Margaret began. One portion will go toward a house in Tacoma for Robert, his name on the deed. Of course. But you'll fund it. Robert nodded, tapping his folder as if it was already signed. Another portion will help Linda open a spa image is important for our family, and this will give us a good reputation in the community. Linda crossed her legs, smiling that polished smile that never quite reached her eyes. And the rest, Margaret said, I'll keep as a reserve, to make sure nothing is wasted. She said it like the decision was already made, like my only role was to nod. I leaned forward, my hands gripping my knees under the table. This money is for my children and their future, I said slowly. It's not up for division. Silence. Robert's grin faltered. Linda's smile stiffened. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin, pale line. The air in the room shifted polite masks, slipping just enough for me to glimpse the irritation underneath. Later that night, David seemed unsettled. Mom just wants to make sure the money's safe, he said, avoiding my eyes. She has experience. I turned to him, my voice low. Safe for who, David? Because it doesn't feel like it's for Emma and Lucas. He didn't answer right away, just sat there, staring at the floor. Then, the line was crossed. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. A real estate agent was confirming our appointment to view a property in my name. I hadn't booked anything. When I asked who had set it up, the agent hesitated. A Margaret Collins with a Linda Miller. They said they were arranging it on your behalf. The words sank like ice water through me. Not only were they making plans, they were using my name to do it. It felt invasive. Violating. Like someone had forged my signature while smiling in my face. I asked Margaret to meet me the next afternoon at a small cafe. I was done being polite. This stops now, I said, my voice trembling not from fear, but from rage I'd been holding back for weeks. The money is mine. It's for Emma and Lucas. There will be no more bookings, no more deposits, no more meetings about it without me. She didn't flinch. Sarah, you're being selfish. Family shares. If you love David and the kids, you'll let us help you manage it. Selfish. That word landed like a slap. As if keeping my children's future secure was somehow wrong. It wasn't about helping anymore. It was about taking. That night, I told David everything the house deposit, the dinner, the fake booking. He was quiet, jaw tight. Then he picked up his phone and sent a group text to his family. From now on, we're not discussing Sarah's inheritance. Don't make any plans, bookings, or decisions about it without her consent. The replies came fast. Robert, fine. Don't blame us when you miss out. Linda, a champagne emoji. Margaret, I'm disappointed. I'll do what's best for the family, with or without your blessing. Her words sat heavy in my chest. They weren't backing down. And for the first time, I started to wonder if they couldn't get the money by asking, what would they do next? The house got quiet after David's message to the family, not a soft, settled quiet. A quiet that waits. A quiet with teeth. I told myself to breathe, to do ordinary things, pack lunches, rinse grapes, fold towels warm from the dryer. But under every small task, a thought pressed like a thumb bruise. Silence isn't peace. It's preparation. 2 days. No surprise visits. No helpful articles about inflation. No emojis clinking champagne glasses. On the third night, while Emma practiced spelling words and Lucas hunted for a Lego astronaut under the couch, David's phone lit up. Mom. He read. He sighed. He put the phone down and reached for plates. What did she say? I asked. She wants to meet, he said lightly. Just me? To talk about what family stuff. It's not about you. Not about me. The words pinched, small and cold. Where her place? Tomorrow. I nodded. Inside me, something stood up and faced the door. He texted, here when he arrived. For nearly an hour, nothing. I wiped a clean counter, checked the lock on the back door twice, put the kettle on and forgot to turn it on, then leaving now. I stared at those 2 words until the screen dimmed. He came home smelling like lemon polish and winter air. His face was careful. How was it? I asked. Fine, he said. A pause. Robert was there. The quiet in our kitchen sharpened. What did they say? David. He rubbed his temple. Responsibility. Protection. How money can change people. Which people? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I saw it without being told. Margaret folded in her armchair like a queen who knows the rules. Robert leaning forward, hungry. David set between them like a hinge on a door they wanted to swing me through. Did they mention me? I asked. He exhaled. Yes. What did they say? That you're overwhelmed, fixated on not spending. That grief can make people irrational. Irrational. I repeated, steady. I told them no. He said quickly. I told them you're cautious, not unstable. I told them to stop. And they said, love makes you blind. Love. How easily people file that word into a blade. He looked tired and honest, but honesty rarely comes whole the first time. What else? David. He swallowed. They floated a what if? If you made a bad decision? If you got scammed?
If you were unwell. His voice faltered. They said there's a legal process in extreme cases. Temporary guardianship to protect the family assets. Protect, I said quietly. From me? I told them absolutely not. But it's a conversation, I said. Because they had it. I'm sorry. I nodded once because nodding hurt less than shouting. He went to shower. The house breathed around me, the dryer thumping a loose button, the fridge humming. David's phone buzzed where he'd left it on the island. I didn't touch it. But the notification preview flashed anyway, Margaret think carefully. Before it's too late. I wrapped my hands around a mug that had gone cold. When he came back downstairs, I said, "Tell me everything. No trimming. No softening." He sat. They think you'll block opportunities out of fear. They think I should take more initiative. Define initiative. Consolidating accounts. Reassigning authorizations. Paperwork. I refused. Did they suggest making me look irresponsible? They asked about your sleep. About the headaches. About when you told Linda not to open the college jar. I asked her not to touch it. I said, "That's a boundary." "I know," he said. I told them that. But they're building a story. A story. The fastest way to take something is to narrate it out of someone's hands. I stood at the sink because standing felt stronger than splintering. I'm not just guarding money anymore. I said to the window's reflection, I'm guarding me. Behind me. His chair scraped softly. I'm with you, he said. I won't let them do anything. I believe you, I said. But I need proof. What do you want me to do? No more private meetings. No plans without me. No what-ifs about my competence. If they push again, we cut contact. He nodded. Jaw set? Okay. And move your direct deposit out of the joint account for now, I added. Not because I don't trust you. Because I don't trust how far they'll push you to push me. Grief flickered in his eyes. For what they're making us do. For what they're making us see. I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I listed facts. Neat as evidence bags, Margaret placed a deposit without consent. They staged a meeting to allocate my inheritance. They used my name to book a showing. Now they are drafting a narrative. At 2:13 a.m., I got up, pulled a file box from the closet, and made a new folder, Boundaries. In it, a transcript of the realtor's voicemail, screenshots of the disappointed and don't blame us texts. Robert's spreadsheet, Linda's champagne emoji. I wasn't planning a courtroom. I was planning clarity. Morning brought small mercies. Emma's chatter about a field trip. Lucas's drawing of a rocket labeled mine. David's hand finding mine at the sink. Then an unknown number called. Mrs. and Collins, a smooth male voice asked. This is Dr. Haynes. Your mother-in-law thought you might benefit from a quick mental load screening we offer. I ended the call. My pulse rang in my ears. It wasn't just a story anymore. It had appointments. I texted David. "Did your mother hire someone to assess me?" He replied, "I'll handle it. Don't engage. Don't engage." As if the problem were my reaction, not their escalation. At noon, another ping. A new thread, and this time she added, "Me, Margaret, coffee on Pike 4 p.m. Just us. We need to discuss next steps before Sarah makes anything worse. Before I make anything worse." I typed, "There will be no meeting without me." Then deleted it. Typed, "We are done discussing my money." Deleted that too. Instead, I opened my banking portal and added another authorization layer. Then I emailed my mother's old lawyer with a subject line that locked itself as I typed, "Consultation request, guardianship concerns." Readiness feels different than fear. It sits up. It takes notes. When David got home, I met him at the door and I saw the message. I said, "I told her no." He answered. And I told her if she pushes again, we're done. What did she say? That I'm choosing you over family. You are choosing family, I said. Yours, ours. He pulled me in for a breath. The house felt like ours again. Then his phone buzzed once more. "Margaret, think carefully. Doors close." He typed without looking at me for approval. Some doors are meant to. He set the phone face down and didn't pick it up again.
If it weren't for that message Margaret sent David, think carefully, doors close, maybe we would have kept pretending everything was fine. But we both knew the time for pretending was over. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with David. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound between us. The light above the sink cast long shadows across the room. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also hesitation. "David," I said quietly, "we need to meet them. All of them. At the same time. No more secret talks. No more whispers. I want to hear what they want directly." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "It's going to get ugly." I looked him straight in the eye. "It's already ugly. I'm done letting them chip away at me from the shadows." 2 days later, we were at Margaret's house. Her living room was spotless, as always, cream-colored walls, a glass coffee table, family portraits perfectly aligned. But the air felt heavy. The faint scent of lavender from her diffuser somehow felt artificial, like it was trying to mask something sour underneath. Margaret's smile when she saw me was thin, almost brittle. "Oh, I thought David was coming alone," she said, her voice just a touch too sweet. I ignored the jab and sat down on the couch. David sat beside me, close enough that our knees touched, a silent signal that we were in this together. Robert and Linda were already there. Robert lounged in the armchair, one ankle resting on his knee, flipping the corner of a folder with his thumb. Linda sat with her usual polished posture, her pearl earrings catching the light, glancing at me with a small, satisfied smirk. Margaret started. "Sarah, we've been talking, and we think it's time we put a proper plan in place for the inheritance. You've been holding on to it without using it, and that's not good for anyone." Her tone wasn't a suggestion, it was a verdict. I stayed silent, letting her talk. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. We propose creating a family fund. You'll transfer the majority of the money into it, and I'll manage it to ensure it's safe. That way. It benefits everyone David, the children, even the extended family. My pulse quickened. And if I say no, I asked. Margaret's lips tightened. Then, I fear there will be consequences. Ones none of us want. Before I could respond, Robert slid the folder across the coffee table toward me. Inside was a neatly stapled document, a legal agreement. This, he said smoothly, is just a temporary authorization. It allows Mom and me to handle investments, property purchases, all the stuff that can be overwhelming for someone without financial experience. I looked down at the paper. Words like full discretion and unrestricted authority jumped out at me in bold, sharp print. If I signed this, I wouldn't just be handing over the money, I'd be handing over control of my life. David shifted uncomfortably beside me. Margaret's voice softened, turning almost maternal. David, honey, you know I only want what's best for the kids. Sarah doesn't have to carry this burden alone. We're family. We help each other, Robert added. Think about it. All that money sitting there, losing value every day. It's practically irresponsible not to use it. Linda finally spoke, her tone laced with condescension. Sarah, sweetie, you've been a homemaker for years. That's a full-time job, sure. But this, managing millions, that's a whole different league. I turned to David, searching his face for something reassurance, support, anything. For a moment, I saw conflict there, the pull of loyalty, the weight of pressure. Then, he stood up. We're done here, he said. Margaret's eyes narrowed. David, don't let her drag you away from your own family. He looked right at her. I'm not. I'm taking my wife out of a trap. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. I rose to my feet, my voice steady. The money my mother left me is mine. I know exactly what you've been trying to do, and it ends now. I won't sign anything. I won't hand it over. And from this moment forward, I will protect my family from anyone who tries to take what isn't theirs. Margaret's jaw tightened. You'll regret this, Sarah. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll regret my own decision. Not one forced on me. We walked out without another word. The folder sat unopened on the coffee table. Linda's smirk had vanished. Robert's knuckles were white where they gripped the armrest, as if he were holding back from shouting. When we got into the car, David closed the door and exhaled a deep, shuddering breath. The sound felt like the first inhale after being underwater too long. As we pulled away, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. The door between us had just started to close for good, and something in my gut told me they weren't done trying to pry it back open. If I had ever thought that silence meant peace, I was wrong. Silence, I learned, is just the breath a storm takes before it hits. It's the pause where people retreat into the shadows to sharpen their knives. It had been a week since that night David told his family firmly that we would no longer discuss my inheritance. A week without phone calls, without casual visits, without another string of links to investment opportunities. The house felt quiet, almost gentle, filled only with the hum of the fridge and the scratch of Emma's pencil against her homework. But under it all, I could feel it. That tiny, constant alarm in my chest. The kind you try to ignore, but that never really stops ringing. The first sign came so softly, it almost slipped past me. I was coming back from the store, arms heavy with bags, when a neighbor caught me in the parking lot. She smiled polite enough, but her eyes had that curious tilt to them. "I heard you moved all your money to an overseas account," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather, avoiding the high taxes here. The question hit me like cold water. I blinked. "Where did you hear that?" She shrugged a kind of shrug that had no source and took no responsibility. "Oh, people talk." The next day, an old friend texted me, "Hey, is everything okay between you and David? I heard you're keeping the inheritance separate, in case things go south." I didn't need to ask who people were. Margaret's voice was all over it. And then I saw the rest of the pattern. Robert and Linda weren't just dropping hints, they were planting entire stories, telling extended family that I was hiding money from David and that our marriage was on the rocks. Meanwhile, Margaret was spinning a softer, more dangerous narrative that I had been unstable ever since receiving the money, that she and David were concerned for the children's well-being. They weren't going after the money anymore.
They were going after my reputation, my credibility, the way people saw me as a mother. And that terrified me. Because money you can protect with a bank account. But your name, your character, once that's dragged through the mud, no amount of washing will make it clean again. Margaret didn't stop there. She started calling David more often, always when I was busy with the kids, dropping little comments like, "You need to think about the children, dear. Sarah's never handled this kind of money before." Or, "I heard she's looking at a property in her name only. You can't let that happen without discussing it." I could feel the tension building in David. He tried to hide it, but it was there, in the way he hesitated before answering me, in the way his eyes shifted when I brought up his mother. And then they crossed a line I didn't even know they were willing to cross. One afternoon, Linda showed up at Emma's school and picked her up without telling either me or David. I only found out when I got there and Emma was gone. My stomach dropped so hard I could barely breathe. I called Linda, my voice shaking. And she cheerfully told me, "Relax, Sarah. We're just taking her shopping." Margaret wanted to spend some time with her. By the time Emma was home, safe and unharmed, I was shaking so badly I could hardly stand. It wasn't about trust. It was about boundaries, about the fact that they felt entitled to cross into my life, into my children's lives, without a second thought. That night, I sat David down at the kitchen table. No distractions, no excuses. I told him we needed to draw hard lines and keep them. I said there would be no more unannounced visits. If they wanted to see the kids, they would have to ask first. From now on, Emma and Lucas would only ever be picked up by us. And the school would be told formally that no one else was allowed. I told him I would no longer discuss the inheritance with his family in any way, not even in passing, and that calls from them would only be answered if they were urgent and directly about the children. I spoke slowly, deliberately, like each word was being set into stone. David listened, silent, his hands folded together, his eyes fixed on mine. For a brief moment, when he nodded, I thought maybe he finally understood. But I also knew deep down that his family wasn't going to just stop. People who feel entitled don't walk away quietly. So I began to prepare. Quietly, methodically. I started saving every text, every voicemail, every screenshot of a post or comment I could trace back to them. I asked a couple of neighbors, people I trusted, to let me know if they heard anything about me or the kids. Because by now, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about holding my ground anymore. It was about protecting my home before they tried to burn it down. And I had a feeling the next move they made would be the most dangerous yet. If I had learned anything over the last few months, it was that silence was never safety. It was a pause, a breath, the step backward before someone lunges. After David and I set the boundaries, his family stayed quiet for a week. No calls, no visits, no just dropping by. But that quiet was heavy, and I could feel them circling. It started when Margaret tried to pick Emma up from school one afternoon. The staff following our written instructions politely told her she wasn't on the list. She left without a word. That night, David's phone lit up. Her voice, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. David, she's turning your children against me. She's making you choose between your wife and your own mother. By the next day, the whispers had started. She won't let them see the kids. She's keeping the family apart. It didn't stop there. Robert posted something vague on Facebook. Some people forget who helped them when they had nothing. Money changes hearts faster than time ever could. Linda sent David a text. If you keep letting Sarah control you like this, you'll lose us. All of us. But the worst blow came in an envelope, a letter, sent anonymously to the school district claiming that I was mentally unstable and should be evaluated before being allowed to make decisions for my children. I felt my hands tremble as I read it. It wasn't just about the money anymore. They wanted to break me. That night, I printed every screenshot, every text, every post, and put them in a neat, heavy folder. David and I drove to Margaret's house. Robert and Linda were already there. The air inside was stale, thick with something unsaid. I placed the folder on the coffee table. Read it, I told them. My voice didn't shake. All of it. Margaret's eyes darted over the pages. Robert crossed his arms. Linda rolled her eyes. I've stayed quiet, I said. I've let things slide. I thought maybe, deep down, you cared about me, about the kids. But this, trying to turn the school against me, planting rumors. It ends tonight. Margaret leaned forward, her tone syrupy but sharp. We're family, Sarah. Sometimes family needs to step in. You've never handled money like this before. We only wanted to protect the children from your stop. David cut in. His voice was low, but solid. Mom, my family is Sarah and our kids. If you can't respect her, then you won't see them. Margaret froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. Robert pushed back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. "You're making a mistake," he spat, and walked out. No one followed him. When we got home, David and I had drafted an email sent to every relative. From now on, we wouldn't be attending family gatherings. We wouldn't be taking calls unless it was urgent and about the children. And we would no longer discuss or entertain any discussion about my inheritance. That night, we moved the last of the money into a trust account, ours. Only ours. Untouchable. The house felt different, quieter. Not the silence of danger, but of peace. Emma's laughter floated from the living room. Lucas was building something with Legos, humming to himself. I stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt the sting of tears, not from sadness alone, but from relief. Because yes, I'd lost something, but I'd kept what mattered. And maybe, if I hadn't received that $3.5 million, I would still be clinging to the idea that family means unconditional love. Now, I know better. Sometimes, to save your home, you have to burn the bridge that leads to it. 6 months later, we packed the last box, loaded the kids into the car, and drove south away from Seattle. Away from the street where too many memories had turned bitter. Portland, Oregon, felt like fresh air. Our new house wasn't a mansion. It didn't need to be. It was ours, every brick, every window, every key.
I used part of my inheritance to set up an education fund for Emma and Lucas, locked, untouchable. There for every dream they'd ever want to chase. We bought a home big enough for comfort, but small enough to keep us grounded. And the rest went into safe investments and no risks, no quick wins, no doors left open for anyone to try and pry it away. The kids made new friends, and David found a local tech company where he could work fewer hours and still be home for dinner. I planted a garden, not just flowers, food. Something about watching things grow with your own hands felt like reclaiming control. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I'd think back to everything that happened. The arguments, the accusations, the lines we had to draw. And I realized that money didn't ruin my life. It revealed it. It showed me who truly stood beside me and who only stood close enough to take. Now, when I lock the door at night, it's not to keep the world out. It's to protect the world we've built inside. And here, in this new home, in this new city, we are finally truly free.